know, and several of you participated in this past Monday in Arlington, an EPA meeting. They took pains to tell us it was not a public hearing, it was a meeting. And the purpose of that meeting was to receive comments on the likely update of a number of Clean Air Act standards for the oil and gas sector, including what they call the New Source Performance Standards, or NSPS, and National Emission Standards for Hazardous Air Pollutants, also known as NESHAP. Debra Rogers, who's seated here to my right, is a member of the League of Neighborhoods Gas Drilling Committee, and she was able to attend that meeting on Monday and is here to share some late-breaking relevant information which was presented at that meeting.
Can you hear me all right? Yeah, okay. Monday at the EPA meeting, HARP, the Houston Advanced Research Center, gave a presentation to EPA. I've spoken a great deal about HARP in the past because they're the sponsors of the Environmentally Friendly Drilling Systems program. It's a program they put together with Texas A&M and themselves and I believe Terra Platforms. And they identified about 120 different technologies which can be used in various combinations to lower emissions from oil and gas sites by over 90%. It's important to note that HARP is industry funded. This is an industry funded group. And they had this to say Monday at the EPA meeting after reviewing the Titan study. They questioned the formaldehyde readings. You heard about the Quicksilver Lake Arlington, I think it was Lake Arlington facility compressor station. HARP said formaldehyde is a hazardous air pollutant, probable carcinogen, irritant to eye, nose, throat, and lung, powerful radical source, may put Dallas-Fort Worth into ozone non-attainment, and combustion sources such as flares and engines at natural gas sites may be underestimated in emission inventory as demonstrated during a 2009 field study. Now, we've heard a lot about effect screening levels. The effect screening level, TCEQ, for formaldehyde, acute short-term, which is 1 hour, is 12 parts per billion. Chronic, 1 year, is 4.5 parts per billion. What's interesting is Titan actually attributed the formaldehyde to an unidentified source and also to vehicular traffic. The maximum 2-hour urban roadside concentrations observed in the U.S. is 17 parts per billion. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you, but if you can just remember this, 17 parts per billion. The maximum 1-hour concentration in the Houston Ship Channel for formaldehyde is 52 parts per billion. Now, we all know Houston Ship Channel is probably one of the most polluted places on Earth. In the Titan study, at this compressor station, they recorded formaldehyde at 69 parts per billion, 81 parts per billion, 100 parts per billion, 114 parts per billion, 127 parts per billion. That is, in some cases, over twice the Houston Ship Channel. The conclusions that HARP, an industry-funded group, drew from this was emissions of and human exposure to formaldehyde due to oil and gas exploration and production may be underestimated in the Barnett Shale. Conventional monitoring techniques are too sporadic and inaccurate to quantify formaldehyde exposure and emissions in the Barnett Shale. Control of formaldehyde emissions from oil and gas sites may help avoid ozone non-attainment in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Now, we hear a lot from industry about jobs provided and taxes paid to local municipalities, and certainly no one would argue that these are not important, but they are only one aspect of the overall picture. Our energy policy, whether it's on a local level or a national level, has got to take into account the costs associated with health effects directly attributable to oil and gas operations. Just a few more numbers and then I'm through. EPA provided me with an estimate of the number of adverse health effects which could be completely avoided by lower mandatory ozone levels. Hospital and emergency rooms visits, 21,000, completely avoided. Upper and lower respiratory symptoms, 111,000 cases, completely avoided. Aggravated asthma, 58,000 cases, completely avoided. Days of work gained by lowering ozone standards, 2.5 million. That's a lot of money. When you take the production of workers 8 hours a day, 2.5 million days of work. Days gained, which now call for restricted activity, 8.1 million. We have to look at this in its overall picture. It's not just about jobs and taxes. It's about everything that's associated with it. Thank you.
speaker, and you say green completions can't be used in areas with no pipelines. How frequently are wells drilled without access to pipelines? Well, we really just kind of talked about that.
You're skipping some questions. That's mine right there.
This one?
In your people finger, you cast it about 3 times.
Okay. I'm trying to spread, we need to get some more answers from other people. Just
I know, but you haven't asked that one. You skipped it 3 times.
This one?
I want that one. It's sticking out the furthest.
This one?
No, you just touched it. You're picking and choosing questions, and I really would like my questions asked. No?
We've already asked.
No? Oh my gosh. Right there. Yeah, that's it.
Can't ask all four, but how about
I'll
the
summarize them.
second one? Okay. This one says there are gas wells, frac pits, and evaporation tanks near Fort Worth's water sources. Eagle Mountain Lake, Lake Worth, Van Brook Lake. Is Fort Worth water affected? We may not have anybody here who can answer that question, quite frankly. Wilma, do you have, Wilma has done some work on, would you like to, can you respond to that?
You also have someone here from Lake Worth.
Who here from Lake Worth? Okay, what would you want to respond to that?
When you go out and examine some of the drilling sites and the production sites that are in the drainage system, that are obviously in the drainage systems, you will see that there has been some runoff, some gullies eroded as a result of some runoff. So there is the potential for contamination of the water sources from these sites, and it's visible. And I'm sure there's been particular emissions, like we'll talk about the barium. If there were particular emissions, those could be carried into the water source as well.
We live 300 yards from a frac pit and 4 evaporation tanks. What are the health risks?
Well, that was written before on the presentation, and I know the health risks we're experiencing actually every day. We have headaches and dizziness, and my daughter has terrible migraine headaches, misses school up to 3 times a week. If we move away from this area, how long will those health effects stay with us?
And that goes to your other question.
Yeah.
We've been breathing in these chemicals since drilling began. How long will the chemical effects be present in our bodies?
As the toxicologist.
Well, I assume that you've seen your family physician,
Absolutely.
and what does he or she recommend?
Well, we can't figure out, we haven't specifically said it's the chemicals that you're living next door to. We're taking medicines for migraines and medicines and having CAT scans, looking for what is causing all these terrible headaches. It's obviously the chemicals that we're breathing in daily. How long will these chemicals stay in your body if you move from this area?
Well, as you might imagine, I'm going to say that's going to depend on if the symptoms are in fact caused by chemicals. That's going to depend on what the chemicals are.
The chemicals that are involved in fracking that we're all talking about here, that maybe you're not, but that Ms. Subra will tell us that we're breathing in daily. How long do these things last? If I move from Fort Worth, Texas, and living next door to frack pits and gas wells and evaporation tanks that are all over town, if I move away from this, can I have a child in 5 years and not have
Teratogenesis.
Teratogenic effects? Will my daughter's migraine headaches clear up? That's what I want to know. How long will these chemicals in our bodies be present? How long will this last?
There
Well-
aren't any studies. We're the guinea pigs. We're the studies. Right here. There are no children or the guinea pigs.
My daughter is 7. She has migraine headaches 3 days a week where she cannot go to school. Right next to her school is a gas well. We can't get away from it in Fort Worth. I've come to understand that. The companies are going to make money and they're going to drill and everybody's going to be employed and that's going to be great. But we're all going to get cancer and have deformed babies. Is that what I'm how long is that going to last? If I move in a couple of years, will my body clean itself out?
They don't know. Where are you gonna move to?
Well, it's a medical question. I have, without detailed information, I certainly can't say anything meaningful, and I urge you to continue interacting with your doctor and doing whatever he or she recommends.
Ms. Super, what experiences have you found in people that live in these areas, if they move, did they get better? If the people in Midlothian move, would they get better?
I've found that a lot of people that move out of the area that are having the acute impacts get better, and then some other issue comes up in their community and they're made sick again. However, what you're talking about is not just the acute impacts, but the long-term impacts, and how long are those long-term impacts. Is Theo still on the phone? She would be the one that would be able to tell you how long that there's a potential after exposure has ceased.
Yeah, and my daughter's 7, she was born here. If I move, am I lowering her risk of developing cancer? I mean, these people can sit up there all day and do their tests that are turned off because they know the truck is coming or because they know the test is coming. I don't care about their test. There's enough data out there to know we're all in a bad situation. So the only way to get out of that situation is to move. Right?
I'll tell you what we can do. We can't do it tonight because she's not on the phone, but we can pose your question to Dr. Colborn and see what her answer would be, because Wilma said she would be the one to answer that. Did you leave your email address so we can send you the...
I will.
Okay.
I'll only
Please
go
do.
distribute it to her.
Please do. Okay. Okay. I tell you what, we are at 40 minutes into this. I'm saying we take about 5 more
She's a
minutes.
chemist. She can
I understand. And then, but we're not through all these questions. So we can take a few more of these and a few more from there and call it a night. You want to hold your, because you raised your hand before. Can you hold your question, or is it a follow-up to this? Is that what you're saying?
I was going to try to answer her question because I'm feeling her pain on this, and I think she deserves an answer. It's not going to be a good one, but it depends on what the chemicals are, and some of them have been identified. So you would want to look up those chemicals and find out, are they fat soluble? Are they water soluble? How do they metabolize in the body? There's going to be statistics on how long those things will be carried with you. And so if you've had an acute exposure, then maybe moving away will help you. Now, if you've had a long-term exposure, depending on what the chemical is and how it's metabolized in your body, you may never get rid of it. And those are usually the kinds of things that will cause cancer. So it really depends on what the chemicals are. So you should look them up, or even have Wilma send them to you because we have the information. So you should get the information and just see what the known information about them are. And there's, I believe, National Institute of Health. They have a body burden study online that will identify the kinds of chemicals that they're finding people carrying around with them, and what most people's body burdens are of those chemicals. And it would be really interesting if there was some testing done in the Barnett Shale to find out if our body burdens are different than the rest of America, because that would be very telling. But there is information, and you can find it.
Okay.
And my heart goes out to
Thank you. Okay. So, and your study sites were chosen in part by the volume of liquids produced. How much liquid was produced?